Borlongan, founder of 5x5. What brings you to the Web Summit today?
I'm here to teach a masterclass for General Assembly on, well, it's a crash course on open data.
And you've got a huge background in open data. Could you just fill us in a bit on that?
Wow, it's just crazy to hear that I've got a huge background in open data, because I don't think many people do, in the sense that it's a fairly new field. So I've got a few hats. At 5x5, what we do is we help businesses unlock the potential of open data. And then I've got my government hat, where I work I'm on the expert committee of the French Prime Minister's task force for open data. And then very recently, as of 2 days ago actually, we'll be directing the Open Data Institute Paris as well. So that's a non-profit, it's a very similar objectives.
And what kind of work are you doing with the government and trying to encourage them to adopt open data?
Well, it's not the urging that's really a problem. I think we've come to a point in open data where the question is no longer if, but how. So the thing with open data is that it's not just up to the government to make it work. There's so much of it that depends on startups that are willing to reuse it, that are getting interested by it, excited, the tools that we're going to build to make it a little easier. So that's the part that I'm helping them in, sort of trying to get the community excited about something that's kind of new and still fairly experimental.
For about the past year, possibly 2 years, we've been hearing big data, big data, big data. Is it going to be open data from now on?
Well, I mean, open data is really just one of those components that makes big data interesting. There are all these governments and companies that are sitting on these treasure troves of data that's just somewhere in their basement that no one can do anything with. And once you open it, obviously, you have a lot of people that are going to start checking out, building new services upon it, finding links, exposing variability, and just making it so much more interesting than a box in a basement.
And to talk a bit about what 5x5 can do for companies that want to work with open data, I saw that you're not just working with massive organizations, you can work with people who work in visualizations and things like that. Mm-hmm. So what kind of services can you offer in a really broad spectrum?
So 5x5 is, well, we call ourselves an open data agency, but what we really are is at the intersection of service design, open data, and communication. And I say that in that specific order, because you need service design to figure out what the problems are, right? Open data it's not an end in itself. It's really just a means. And so what it's really there for is to try to solve some problems you can have. Make it easier to get to work, to find schools, to travel, to find a proper doctor when you're in a new country, that sort of thing. So service design to figure that out. Then we talk about opening the data that might help you solve those problems, finding the communities that can leverage them. And then communication, because it's really difficult actually to tell the compelling stories about how all of this comes together. So that's sort of what we do.
And when it comes to sourcing that key data that people want to access, do you approach the companies yourself?
Well, we actually work with the companies. So let's say an example is the French National Railway Company. It's one of our key clients at the moment. And one problem that they're trying to solve is that trains and train stations, they're just not as accessible as they should be for travelers with disabilities, or suitcases or small children. Not that that's the same thing, of course. But so what we're trying to do, what we do is we get communities together, people that do have these problems, try to figure out what they are. Sometimes we realize it's the silliest things, like the ticket booths are a little too high. And so when you're in a wheelchair, you can't access them. And nothing on the maps of the train stations show you where the lower ticket booths are that you can actually buy your tickets in if you're in a wheelchair. So we figured out what those problems are, bring the community together. And when I say community, I'm not necessarily talking about the tech community. This is what's really great about open data. We've got, I was in a room with people who couldn't see, who couldn't hear, who were in wheelchairs, trying to figure all this out with the tech community, with developers specialized in transit. And then based on that, we're like, okay, so what data do we need to solve these problems? Then we start releasing the data. Then it's so much easier for me to go to different services of the SNCF and say, look, I know you don't want to give us this data set and you're really uncomfortable about opening it, but it would really make it so much easier for people who are blind to travel. Can I please have it? And then they're more comfortable about giving it. And then, so now we're also working with organizations like OpenStreetMap, for example, who are helping us build even more data. The thing is, like, when you can open data, but sometimes there's data you just don't have that you need, and some of that can actually be crowdsourced. So we partnered with OpenStreetMap, and what they're doing is really incredible. Actually, is that they're mapping train stations, but inside. So like when you go on, let's say, Google Maps, you can see a big chunk of the train station. Now you'll be able to see the corridors, the bathrooms, the heights of the ticket machines, everything like that.
It's brilliant. And we're at a tech conference here today. There's a lot of tech people here, but it sounds like open data is something that everyone can be involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. So my course is actually called Open Data for Non-Technicals. And there's a reason for that. And I feel that one of the reasons why open data hasn't taken off as much as it should is that so far it's been about the data. It's been about the data. Everyone thinks it's this kind of like very geeky, super technical thing that doesn't really concern them. When actually it's not about the data, it's about the insights that you derive from it, it's about the innovation that you can build on top of it. And that's not necessarily just for people who can code. Like I can't code. I can't code, but open data, like I said, it's more than just binary code. It's really, what it is really a movement.